So in this video, we are continuing to look at scatter plots, but more specifically, we are going to look at the trend lines associated with the scatter plots. Now, the scatter plots could be thousands of data points or millions of data points. The trend line is going to kind of summarize all of those data points down into a line, a linear equation, y equals mx plus b. And so where we're going in this video is just really a review of chapter 8 when we were writing equations. We're going to pick 2 points on the graph, pick 2 points on the line, on the trend line, and then use one of those points in M to find B. Now, before we get into actually writing the equations, let's look at these 2 examples. The scatter plots are the dots. The trend line is the pink line, or the line that I just went through and highlighted. So the trend line is something that sits on top of the scatter plot to show you the overall trend. So this one, just to review from the last video, this would have a positive correlation because it is generally going uphill. This one would have a negative correlation because it is generally going downhill. So the slope of this line would be positive. The slope of this trend line would be negative. So that's just kind of a quick review. So let's use that idea and this stuff off to the right, and let's actually write the equation for a trend line. So it says draw a trend line, and then we're going to take it one step further and actually write the equation as well. And so the trend line, we want to make a line so that there's about the same number of points on the top and on the bottom. And so I went through and I've already drawn a trend line. Now, just give it your best on your paper to make it match. But more importantly, I went through and I pulled out 2 points that were on my trend line that I could identify the x and y coordinate easily. So this one is 4, and it looked to be 13 to me. So that's the first point, and then the second point is 6, 16. Okay, so I wrote those down. Now I'm going to use those 2 points to write an equation. So up here, pick 2 points and find M. So I'm going to use that slope equation back from chapter 8. So my 2 points are 4, 13, and 6, 16. And so I'm going to subtract the y's from back to front. 16 minus 13 over 6 minus 4. Subtract the x's from back to front. 16 minus 13 is going to give me 3. 6 minus 4 is going to give me 2. So there's my equation, 3/2. And then the next thing was to pick one of the points, and I always just said pick the first point, and the slope. And then now let's do y equals mx plus b. All right, so y is going to be in the point itself. So there's x, y, and m. So y is going to be 13 equals m, which is 3/2 times x, which is 4 plus b. All right, 3/2 times 4 is going to give me 6 plus b equals 13. I'm going to subtract 6, and I get b equals 7. Now from here, I'm going to write my equation as y equals mx plus b, but m we found to be 3/2 x plus b we found to be 7. And so the equation of my trend line is going to be y equals 3/2 x plus 7. Now, depending on which points you picked, your trend line may be different. If your trend line is a little bit different than mine, but as long as it is close, we are good, because this is just an estimation. In the real world, there are computer programs that estimate trend lines, so it's not like people are doing this by hand to kind of minimize error. All right, so here's our next example. So the next example says, use the graph to answer the following questions. I've got calories burned for a 150-pound person, whether they are biking or biking or sitting. And so biking is going to be the one on top. So just like before, if you don't have your graph in color, I would just go ahead and label these as biking and sitting. The first question says, write an equation for the bicycling line. So that's going to be that top line, my blue line. So I need to write an equation. So pick 2 points and then find the equation like we just did. I'm just going to pick 2 points on the graph. I always like to pick 0, 0 if it's an option because that's going to be the easiest one. And then I'll just go ahead and pick 1. And so that looks to be about 1 and then 2, I don't know, 220 maybe. We're just estimating though, giving it our best. All right, so there are my 2 points. First thing I'm going to do is find the slope, which is y2 minus y1, 220 minus 0, over x2 minus x1. And so my slope is going to be 220. Now I need to use that slope and the point to find b. So I'm just going to use the first point, 0, 0, and m is 220. So I've got y equals mx plus b. 0 equals 220 times x, which is 0 plus b. I'm going to get 0 equals 0 plus b, so b equals 0. And so my equation is going to be y equals m, 220, x plus 0, but I don't need to write plus 0. So there is my equation. Again, depending on what you estimated this number to be, if you said 210, then your equation would be slightly different, but as long as you're close, you're good to go. Then part B says, estimate how many calories a 150-pound person would burn if they cycled for 2 hours. So what this really says is you want to plug in x equals 2 to the bicycling equation you just got. So that equation I just found, I want to now find, well, what if they had 2 hours of cycling? So y equals 220 times x, which is 2, so that's going to give me 440 calories burned. All right, the next one, I'm going to shift gears some. So the next one, I'm going to do the same thing as example A, but now for the sitting line. So I'm going to write an equation for the sitting line. Okay, that's going to be the line on the bottom, or that pink line. I need to find 2 points. Well, still pick that point 0, 0, and I'm just going to go with 1, 100 because it's a nice, easy point. So I've got 0, 0, and 1, 100. I need to find m. So y2, 100 minus y1, 0 over x2 minus x1. And so I've got 100 over 1, or a slope of 100. Use a point, so I'm going to pick that same point 0, 0, and m equals 100 to fill in y equals mx plus b. And so again, this one is going to give me a b of 0. So my equation is going to be y equals mx 100x plus b, which is 0. And I don't need to write that. So my equation is going to be y equals 100x. And then part D says, estimate how many calories a 150-pound person burns sitting for 4 hours. So again, I'm going to do similar to what I did before, except I'm going to plug in x equals 4 to the sitting equation, y equals 100x. And so I've got y equals 100, but x is 4. And so y is going to be the calories burned, or 400 calories. And then part E says, estimate how many calories a 150-pound person burns if they bike for 4 hours, bike for 4 hours, then sits for 3 hours. Okay, so I went out, I biked, and then I sat down for 3 hours. If I weighed 150 pounds, how many calories would I burn? Biking for 4 hours and sitting for 3 hours. What we're going to do is just add those two together, and that's going to give me my total estimate calories. Well, the biking equation is this one, y equals 220x. So to bike for 4 hours, I'm going to plug into the biking equation, y equals 220x. So y equals 220 times x, which is 4. And so that's going to give me a total of 880 calories. And then sitting for 3 hours, I'm going to use my sitting equation, y equals 100x. And so 100 times 3 is going to give me 300 calories burned. Add those two together, and so I will get a total of 1,180 calories burned after doing those things back to back.